Good evening and welcome to day 2 of 365 days of amazing stories in 2024 with Theo Mayer. So I'm continuing stories just from my own life at this point. And where to begin? I guess in the beginning. How far back can memory lead me? I have memories of times right around the age of 5 mostly. And I have some other memories as well. Perhaps one of the most significant interactions that I had as a young person was with my grandmother. Her name was Gracie Brown, and of all the people I can think of in the world, she really loved me unconditionally. I remember being held in her arms. She had big, soft boobs, and I remember just laying my head, against that softness and being cuddled in her arms. She would hold me and would sit in a rocking chair on the second floor of her house. And I remember that. I also remember one thing that happened when I was super young. I was two and a half. We used to go to Florida in the winter. And my grandparents loved Florida. They would go down as well. My grandfather always wanted to live in Florida and grow avocados. He loved avocados. And of course, you couldn't really get them in Ohio, where he spent the majority of his life. So anyway, we would go down and stay in this one motel. It had cabins that were around a swimming pool. And the cabins were just right on the beach. There was a road that ran very close to the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. We would go to Vero Beach, and between the road and the ocean was this motel. I had older brothers, 2. And they already knew how to swim. So one of them was 4.5, David, and Brant was a year and a little bit older, so he was close to 6. And I watched them go off the diving board at the pool, which looked kind of fun. And so I walked off the end of the diving board. Now, my mom had watched this happen. She was getting dressed, and she was so worried that I was going to drown that she came running out. I think she was only in her underwear. That's all she had on. But by the time she got to the swimming pool, I had dog paddled myself over to the edge and was hanging on to the edge. She lifted me out. But from that point on, they didn't worry about me in and around water. The ocean, where there were waves, yes, but swimming pools were not a problem. And so from an early age, I was in the water a lot. And you'll see later, as these stories continue, how my familiarity and comfort in the water ended up serving me in kind of adventurous ways later on in life. Gracie and Ted, I was named after my grandfather, Ted. They told my parents to name me Ted, not Theodore. He was Theodore. I guess he didn't like that name. But isn't it odd that I have become Theo, even though I was named Ted? They used to take me to Florida by myself. My other brothers, that didn't happen. I think it happened before I was 5. I remember one day in particular, one trip in particular, I got sick. We were staying at this one hotel. It was kind of in the main part of Vero Beach that was close to the Atlantic. There was another part of Vero Beach. You'd go across the Indian River, and there was kind of a place. I know there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken over there, and kind of, shopping area. Also, the most incredible orange juice squeezing place that you could ever imagine. In my older years, when we used to drive down there, when we get to Florida, we'd stop at this place. And it was all the orange juice you could drink for some just ridiculously low price. They were harvesting oranges all the time, and a certain amount went into this processing area. And it was completely fresh, just squeezed orange juice. God, it was so good. Anyway, we were staying at this hotel. I got sick. I was sick for a couple days, and every day Ted would go out and he'd bring me some gift to help me get better. It was just really sweet. There was a place there called the Driftwood Inn, and it was made completely, well, I'm sure not completely, but much of it was made from driftwood that had washed in, from storms along the coast there. So it was really cool. There were posts and beams that were from trees, and anyway, I was very taken by how cool it was at the Driftwood Inn. We used to go over there for dinners, and they always had live music going. There was a piano player. He would be playing music. And my grandparents used to dance. It was just like really cool, the arm of the man. Well, I guess arm of the man is around the lady's back. And then I think the lady's hand is up on the guy's shoulder. And then their two hands are extended out and together. And certain tunes would come on, and they would just dance around in this dance floor. Sometimes there'd be other people dancing, but Ted loved to dance so much that it didn't matter whether there were people out there or not. They would go out dancing. And I would stand up in my chair and watch them dancing and clap as they danced. They were really joyous together. Loved each other all their lives. They were like each other's sweetheart in a big way. Yeah. Ted and Gracie lived really close to where I lived, in a little town called Clifton in Cincinnati. And Clifton was very close to University of Cincinnati. I lived on Wood Avenue, and my grandparents lived, I think, in Rawson Woods Circle. That was like maybe a 5-minute walk away. And I used to go there, often. Ted used to pay me $1 for pulling weeds out from between the bricks. And I diligently pulled the weeds out until they were all gone, and then I'd get $1, which seemed like a lot of money back then. Wood Avenue was, it crossed Middleton. I think it was Middleton. It was the name of the street. And one side of Middleton, there were probably maybe 6 or 7 houses on either side of Wood Avenue. And then at the end of the street were these big gates that led into Clifton Elementary School, the newer building. Across the street from that, and another street, was the old building. Now, the other end of Wood Avenue was a cul-de-sac, and I lived up that street, about halfway up the hill. Then when you got to the top of the hill, it almost sort of leveled out, And then it ended up in this circle that was wide enough in diameter that a car could, easily just turn and, go back the other direction. At the end of that cul-de-sac, the Westheimers lived. Duffy Westheimer was my age. And then there were at least 3 brothers that were older. Now, beyond the Westheimers' house, and basically all around it, was a nature preserve. And it was hundreds of acres on our side, or at least, the woods that we could access from Wood Avenue. Now, that nature preserve connected with another much larger nature preserve that was on the other side of the street, the name of which I don't remember. In grand total, the nature preserve had about 2,300 acres. Now, at a certain point in time, I was probably, 4 or 5. I have, again, had 2 older brothers, and we would just go off in those woods with, either by ourselves, 3 of us, or with other kids in the neighborhood. And one of the really cool things about that time and that street was there were 8 families that lived along that street. There were probably about 20, 22 houses that were, up Wood Avenue. And 8 of those houses had families in them. And all with kids, within the age range of my brothers. Now, I did have a younger sister, but she came along when I was 6 years old. We used to get together all the time. Every day after school, there would be play going on up the cul-de-sac somewhere, either across the street at the Benz's, or in our backyard. We had a trampoline, or up at the end of the cul-de-sac where the circle was. The circle was just a perfect place for kickball and kick the can, and I don't even remember what all games we played, but we played games all the time up there. My brother, he was older. He was a little rough with me, or with everybody probably, just because he was older. But I remember one day playing kickball, and I was running from third to home, and somebody, I think it was him, hit me with the ball, making me out. And I really got pegged to the point where I tumbled onto the asphalt, the concrete. I skinned up my elbows, my arms, knocked the wind out of me. And when I finally could breathe again, I started crying. My brother came over and he was like, "Don't cry. Only babies cry." And it really impacted me. I felt like I couldn't cry even though I was hurt. So I stopped, but I really stuffed it. I think he didn't want to get in trouble for having hurt me because he figured I'd probably go home and tell Mom and Dad what had happened. But one time I did have to tell him what happened because my brother was playing chicken with me. Not that I had agreed to play chicken on our bikes. He was riding straight for me, and I didn't veer out of the way. He ran his wheel straight into my wheel. And I, being smaller and younger, came off my bike and went straight over the front. And as I did, I had this big metal basket, and it caught my chin. And I got about a 1-inch gash across my chin. It was deep enough I had to get stitches and go to the hospital. My brother, more about him later. All right, I'm going to stop here. Thanks for joining. Come back for more tomorrow.